Some people fight for justice. Others fight over a soggy sandwich and then hire 3 lawyers to do it. Only in America can a trivial dispute explode into a courtroom money bonfire. And trust me, this barely hints at what's coming next. 1. A man once sued a dry cleaner for losing his pants, but the real spectacle wasn't the trousers. It was the legal bill that ballooned into a financial hot air balloon drifting somewhere over the land of dramatic overreaction. This person didn't just ask for reimbursement or a polite apology. No, he marched into court demanding damages so massive they could have funded a small moon landing. He insisted the shop's "satisfaction guaranteed" sign was a binding cosmic contract, as if the universe itself had pinky sworn to protect his slacks. He filed motions, held press conferences, and treated the missing pants like they were the last surviving heirloom of a royal dynasty. Meanwhile, every hour his case dragged on, the lawyer's fees ticked upward like a taximeter in Manhattan rush hour. By the time the dust settled, the cleaners were drowning in legal costs, all over one man's belief that a pair of pants was worth more than a college education. 2. A woman once sued an airline because her in-flight coffee wasn't served at the temperature she expected. The drink cost about $3. The lawsuit? Enough to fund a season of prestige television. Apparently, this passenger believed the cup held not coffee, but a sacred elixir requiring exact thermal alignment with her personal comfort aura. She claimed emotional distress, physical distress, atmospheric distress, possibly even metaphysical distress if the judge had let her keep talking. The airline's attorneys spent billable hours explaining that coffee cools as time passes, a scientific concept most toddlers can verify by touching literally anything left on a counter. Yet she pressed on, convinced she'd suffered a moral crime rather than just being mildly inconvenienced. In the end, the legal costs dwarfed the original beverage price so dramatically that the coffee became a prop in a lesson about proportionality, irony, and how one person's complaint can become a law firm's early retirement contribution. 3. One guy sued a restaurant because his sandwich looked smaller than in the picture, which is bold energy coming from someone who willingly trusted marketing images. The sandwich cost maybe $8. The lawsuit? Well into the territory where accountants start sweating and lawyers suddenly remember they have vacation homes to pay for. He insisted he'd suffered damages because the sandwich betrayed him emotionally, spiritually, and financially, which is astonishing for an object made of lunch meat. He brought printed photos, diagrams, even a ruler, treating the courtroom like a crime scene workshop where the deceased victim was a sub-role. The restaurant hired experts to explain perspective, camera angles, and the concept of advertising being optimistic, and each explanation was billed at a rate that could buy several hundred disappointing sandwiches. By the time the judge dismissed everything, the only thing truly overstuffed was the stack of invoices generated by the world's saddest deli tragedy. 4. A man sued his neighbor over a garden hose that allegedly sprayed onto his driveway, which he described as unacceptable water trespass. The hose retails for maybe $12. The case cost exponentially more because the man treated the droplets like an invading foreign army. He took photos, videos, measurements, and even attempted a slow-motion reenactment, which tragically confirmed only that he had way too much free time. He demanded compensation for emotional erosion, a term he invented, and claimed the driveway's dignity had been compromised. The neighbor, forced to defend himself, hired lawyers who billed hourly rates that could irrigate an actual farm. Court. Hearings dragged on as the plaintiff passionately described each droplet's path like a weatherman doing storm coverage for an audience of zero. After months of judicial patience stretched thinner than the hose itself, the judge dismissed the case. The driveway survived. The legal fees did not. 5. A customer once sued a big box store because the price tag on a clearance candle had a smudge, causing him to misread the cost by exactly $1. The candle was worth less than the sandwich he ate on the way to court. Yet he pursued restitution like he'd uncovered a massive corporate conspiracy. He claimed the smudge constituted misleading financial signage, as though the candle had personally committed fraud against him. The store then hired a legal team whose hourly rate could have repainted the entire home goods section in pure gold leaf. Meetings were held, depositions were scheduled, attorneys studied the candle like it contained state secrets. By the time the case fizzled out, the legal expenses had skyrocketed far beyond anything the candle could ever hope to smell like. The judge essentially ruled that sometimes a smudge is just a smudge, but the financial damage wasn't fragrant for anyone involved. 6. A man sued a car wash because a promotional sign said fast service, and he felt his wash took too long. The wash cost $10. The litigation cost more than a used Honda. He argued that the word fast promised a precise, quantifiable speed, as if the sign were a binding scientific guarantee calibrated by NASA. He presented spreadsheets, time logs, external witnesses, and one handwritten note comparing his wait time to a mild form of captivity. The car wash responded by hiring speed testing experts whose credentials looked suspiciously expensive. Court dates were set and reset as both sides debated the official legal definition of fast, a discussion so painful it should have been classified as a public nuisance. By the end, the only thing moving slowly was the plaintiff's dignity, dragging behind the towering pile of legal fees like a bumper sticker on a car nobody wants to claim. 7. Someone sued a hotel because the complimentary soap did not lather as gloriously as advertised. The soap had a street value of maybe 87 cents, but the plaintiff insisted it had sabotaged their entire vacation. The person argued that weak suds constituted a breach of consumer trust so severe that financial compensation was the only path to healing. The hotel, trapped in this absurd lather-based hostage situation, hired chemists, dermatologists, and marketing specialists, all of whom billed enough to fund an actual spa. Hours were spent discussing foam density as if civilization depended on it. The plaintiff remained adamant, claiming emotional harm from substandard bubbles. By the time the case collapsed under its own soapy incoherence, the combined legal costs were high enough to buy a warehouse full of premium soap, fancy soap, artisan soap, and possibly even a soap factory. 8. A man sued a fast food chain because his fries were too crispy, a phrase that probably made the judge consider early retirement. The fries cost maybe $2, but the plaintiff launched a legal mission to expose what he saw as a deep-fried betrayal. He claimed extreme crispiness posed a safety hazard, emotional hazard, and possibly a dental hazard, even though his dentist politely declined to participate. The restaurant, unwilling to be labeled the crispy menace of America, hired culinary consultants who charged money like they were Michelin-starred surgeons. Several hearings were devoted to the fries' texture, with experts tapping fries on microphones and discussing crunch acoustics. Meanwhile, the legal fees climbed with the enthusiasm of a drive-through line at lunchtime. When the lawsuit finally died a crispy golden death, the court had spent more discussing potatoes than most Idaho. Farmers do in a year. 9. A person once sued a theme park because a souvenir cup cracked in the dishwasher, which is hilarious considering the cup itself cost less than parking. The plaintiff, however, framed the incident as an emotional catastrophe that required sweeping judicial intervention. They argued that the crack represented a breach of memory preservation, implying the cup was some kind of sacred relic rather than a piece of plastic shaped like a cartoon bear. The theme park's attorneys, likely bewildered but still paid handsomely, hired material experts to testify about polymer durability. Depositions were taken, diagrams were drawn. One attorney reportedly demonstrated dishwasher spray angles like they were conducting a military briefing, all to determine whose fault it was that a $6 cup failed to survive a turbulent spin cycle. By the end, the only thing truly broken was the park's legal budget, shattered far more dramatically than the cup itself. 10. A tenant sued their landlord because the apartment's thermostat was emotionally dishonest. The thermostat worked perfectly fine. It just didn't align with the tenant's personal belief about what 72 degrees should feel like. They argued the device caused thermal betrayal, a term no scientist has dared to endorse. The rent dispute was minor. The legal battle, a financial inferno. HVAC experts were summoned like wizards forced into a nonsense prophecy. Lawyers debated temperature perception as if humanity hinged on it. Court transcripts read like a philosophical debate between a malfunctioning smart home and someone who desperately needed a hobby. By the time the judge dismissed everything out of sheer survival instinct, the legal expenses had soared into a climate zone far hotter than 72 degrees. The thermostat remained innocent. Nobody's bank account did. 11. Someone sued a grocery store because a coupon didn't scan. The coupon was worth 50 cents, a humble discount that died so others could witness this breathtaking example of escalation. The plaintiff insisted the failed scan was an act of corporate sabotage, a deliberate plot to deny them financial relief. The store, partly out of fear this person might return, hired attorneys who charged more per hour than the entire coupon aisle combined. Soon the courtroom became a battlefield of coupon policies, barcode technology, and consumer expectations so microscopic they required moral magnification to detect. Legal papers piled up like expired cereal boxes. Experts in retail systems testified with grim seriousness, proving once again that anything can become a disaster if someone is determined enough. By the end, the court spent more money analyzing a 50-cent coupon than it would have cost to hand the plaintiff a crisp dollar and a lifetime ban from self-checkout. 12. A person sued a neighbor over a single missing Amazon package, a package containing a $4 novelty mug that said, "Something extremely inspirational in Comic Sans." Postal workers shrugged. The neighbor shrugged. Everyone shrugged except the plaintiff, who treated the mug like it was the lost crown jewel of suburban civilization. They filed suit alleging theft, emotional distress, and cultural damage, whatever that means. Immediately, lawyers got involved, billing hours to investigate a mug that probably broke before it left the factory. Investigators were hired. Security footage was reviewed frame by agonizing frame. Courtrooms hosted debates over package placement so intense they could power a seasonal miniseries. Eventually, the judge announced, in a tone that suggested the day had already been too long, that there was no meaningful evidence of anything except vast, preventable legal spending. At that moment, the mug effectively became the most expensive drinking vessel since ancient royalty bedazzled theirs with actual gems. 13. A man sued a casino because he slipped on a dropped nacho chip. The chip was worth, well, one chip. The lawsuit, meanwhile, racked up expenses that could recarpet the building. He claimed the nacho was improperly managed, as though the casino should have appointed an official nacho patrol. The plaintiff argued that the chip displayed unusual slipperiness, a phrase no tortilla manufacturer has ever proudly advertised. The casino's lawyers responded with forensic floor analysis, friction measurements, and expert witnesses who probably wondered how life led them here. Attorneys presented the chip, now stale, cracked, and preserved in a plastic bag, as if it were sacred evidence from a heist movie. By the end, the courtroom had spent months contemplating the physics of a nacho, while the legal fees outgrew the entire snack industry. The judge dismissed the drama, though the chip remained a tragic reminder that not all heroes are crunchy. 14. A woman sued a bookstore because the free bookmark handed out at checkout had a slightly bent corner. The bookmark, generously valued at $0, became the centerpiece of a lawsuit worth enough to fund a small literacy campaign. She claimed the crease ruined the reading experience, implying that her eyes refused to perform their job in the presence of imperfect stationery. The bookstore, blindsided by this assault on paper-based dignity, consulted attorneys who billed by the hour like they were composing fine literature. Expert witnesses were brought in to discuss cardstock integrity and crease tolerance, subjects nobody should have to learn about under oath. Court transcripts described the bookmark like an injured athlete, bent but not broken. Eventually, the case dissolved under the weight of its own absurdity, but the financial aftermath lingered longer than any novel's plot twist. The bookmark survived. The legal costs became a tragic footnote. 15. Someone sued a pet store because the goldfish they bought didn't display a friendly attitude. The fish cost $3. The lawsuit? Substantially more than the GDP of the average aquarium. The plaintiff argued the fish ignored them, stared too blankly, and refused to form a meaningful bond, characteristics shared by every goldfish in recorded history. They claimed emotional damages for unmet companionship expectations and demanded a refund plus additional compensation for cold Piscean behavior. The pet store, now legally forced to defend the personality of a creature with a memory shorter than a TikTok, hired veterinarians and aquatic behavior specialists whose fees could fill an Olympic pool. The hearings became a philosophical debate about whether a fish can be rude, which is a question no legal system should ever be required to answer. Eventually, the case was dismissed, but not before proving that the only creature truly lacking warmth in this situation was the plaintiff's financial judgment. 16. A person once sued a hardware store because the free sample packet of grass seed they handed out at checkout failed to inspire growth, which is a poetic way of saying they sprinkled about 12 seeds on dirt and expected a home makeover show to break out. The packet literally said complimentary sample, but the plaintiff interpreted that as a binding promise from nature itself. They claimed financial harm because their yard remained emotionally barren, a phrase that should probably be embroidered on an HOA flag somewhere. The hardware store, now legally trapped in a gardening drama nobody asked for, had to hire soil experts, plant scientists, and a lawyer who likely couldn't keep a straight face while billing hourly. By the end, the legal costs were tallied at a level that could have funded a full landscaping crew for months, all to determine whether 12 seeds had a moral obligation to grow into a lush pastoral paradise for a person who couldn't be bothered to water them. 17. Someone sued a city because a parking meter glitched, resulting in a ticket worth less than what they spent on coffee that morning. But instead of paying it like a normal human adult, this person escalated the matter into a municipal showdown worthy of a political thriller. If political thrillers involved a lot more whining. They insisted the meter had knowingly deceived them, as though it were a rogue robot with a personal vendetta. The city, unwilling to be portrayed as run by faulty metal tyrants, responded with engineers, technicians, and attorneys who billed with the confidence of people buying coastal property. Courtroom discussions about coin calibration and sensor sensitivity dragged on until everyone's soul felt worn down like a penny that had been through 3 generations of laundry cycles. In the end, the legal expenses towered so far beyond the original ticket that the judge suggested, with spectacular restraint, that maybe, just maybe, everyone involved had lost something more, valuable than money, time they would never get back. 18. A woman sued a jewelry kiosk because the mood ring she purchased failed to reflect her emotions accurately, which is a bold claim considering the ring cost about as much as vending machine candy. She insisted that the ring staying blue-greenish during her stressful work week constituted false emotional reporting, an accusation previously unheard of outside very committed improv comedy troupes. The kiosk owner, who probably only wanted a quiet shift where nobody weaponized thermochromic pigments, now had to defend the scientific dignity of novelty rings in a court of law. Experts were called to discuss heat sensitivity and human skin temperature, all while billing fees that could have bought actual diamonds. Meanwhile, the plaintiff maintained the ring had misled her about her inner journey, a phrase that should be stored safely out of reach of courtrooms. After the inevitable dismissal, the only lasting transformation was to everyone's bank account, which reflected a very clear mood. Drained. 19. A man sued a movie theater because the popcorn refill policy confused him, resulting in what he described as non-consensual snack deprivation. The refill, had he read the sign correctly, would have been free. But instead, he paid for a second bucket and decided this constituted financial trauma worthy of judicial intervention. The lawsuit spiraled into a cinematic farce as lawyers debated font sizes, kernel-to-bucket ratios, and whether the refill sign's placement indicated malicious intent. The theater chain, horrified at the idea of being branded a snack thief, hired attorneys whose collective salaries could feed an entire football stadium popcorn for a year. Every deposition featured dramatic retellings of buttery exchange misunderstandings, as though the plaintiff were testifying in a trial about international espionage instead of concession etiquette. Ultimately, the judge dismissed the case, possibly craving popcorn by then, but the amount of money spent arguing about corn inflated the incident into a legal blockbuster with a budget the actual movie never had. 20. Someone sued a thrift store because the vintage lamp they bought turned out to be made in 2014, which, in fairness, is about as vintage as yesterday's leftovers. Instead of accepting that perhaps they should have checked the label, the plaintiff claimed the store had shattered their aesthetic integrity, a phrase that sounds like a tarot reading gone wrong. The lamp cost $10. The lawsuit cost enough for the thrift store to consider whether selling lamps was worth the existential threat posed by customers with too much free time. The store hired appraisers, historians, and authenticity specialists who charged fees befitting ancient artifacts rather than discount lighting. Court discussions dwelled on whether vintage-inspired counted as deception and whether intention mattered in the realm of home decor. When the judge dismissed the case, the lamp returned home with the plaintiff, who still believed it carried deep emotional value, probably because it now cost the legal system more than an actual antique chandelier. 21. A man sued a cafe because the latte art on his drink resembled a misshapen cloud rather than the elegant swan he saw on their menu board. He argued that the artistic failure damaged his social media credibility, which is probably the most modern form of suffering ever attempted in court. The latte itself cost $5. The lawsuit racked up thousands as attorneys debated the legal definition of artistic intent on beverages. The cafe brought in baristas as expert witnesses who solemnly explained milk foam physics while billing enough to buy several espresso machines. Court transcripts read like an avant-garde performance piece about dairy-based disappointment. Ultimately, the judge ruled that Beverages are not commissioned artwork, but the financial damage had already steamed its way through both sides' budgets. The plaintiff's dignity frothed away faster than the latte art he'd been so desperate to post online. 22. A customer sued a tech store because the free phone screen cleaning cloth did not spark joy, claiming the uninspiring wipe had diminished their overall device experience. They argued the cloth's texture was emotionally abrasive, which is impressive considering it was literally designed to be soft. The cloth, valued at absolutely nothing, triggered a courtroom circus featuring manufacturing explanations and ergonomic testimonies that collectively cost more than the average family vacation. The store, baffled but legally cornered, hired consultants in microfiber engineering, yes, that exists, to demonstrate how joy is not a measurable output of textile fibers. As proceedings dragged on, the plaintiff doubled down on the idea that every free accessory should elevate their life experience. By the time the absurdity collapsed under judicial exhaustion, the wipe had become the most expensive square of fabric since royalty used silk. Meanwhile, the phone, ironically, remained dirty. 23. A person sued a fitness center because the complimentary towel lacked motivational energy, which is a fascinating expectation for a rectangle of cotton. They argued the towel failed to encourage them toward their fitness goals, as though it should whisper affirmations while absorbing sweat. The gym, stunned but bound by contract, had to defend the psychic limitations of towels in open court. Trainers were called to testify that fitness equipment typically doesn't engage in emotional coaching. Attorneys charged fees that could have furnished the gym with a jacuzzi, 2 steam rooms, and a smoothie bar. The plaintiff insisted towels should uplift the spirit, not merely mop up the evidence of poor cardio stamina. Ultimately, the judge dismissed the case with the gentle firmness of someone who'd witnessed enough human folly for one lifetime. The towel remained unchanged, still silent, still absorbent, still deeply unmotivated, a mirror of the plaintiff's workout routine. 24. Someone sued a grocery store because the freshly baked bread they purchased cooled down before they got home, claiming the bread's declining warmth constituted a breach of culinary trust. The loaf cost $3. The lawsuit cost an amount that could have purchased the entire bakery section twice over. The store, trapped in a carb-based legal ambush, hired food science experts to explain the shocking truth. Bread cools. The plaintiff refused to accept this, insisting the loaf's temperature drop caused emotional distress and disrupted their dinner aesthetic. Lawyers debated heat retention as if the bread were a critical component in national energy policy. Witnesses described crumb structure under oath, a moment no one expected in their legal career. When the judge dismissed the case, everyone silently agreed bread should not be this expensive to defend. The loaf, now cold and irrelevant, probably ended up stale, much like the argument that spawned the entire financial disaster. 25. A person sued a nail salon because their manicure didn't spiritually align with the photo they brought in, which is quite a demand considering nails are not widely recognized as spiritual mediums. The manicure cost $30, but the lawsuit spiraled into an artistic and philosophical debate about aesthetic destiny. The plaintiff claimed the color lacked energetic presence, a phrase that haunted every lawyer forced to repeat it aloud. The salon, mortified yet legally obligated, hired color theory specialists who billed like Renaissance painters unveiling masterpieces. Court hearings grew dense with discussions about intention, vibe, symbolism, and whether glitter counts as a metaphysical component. By the end, the legal fees hovered somewhere between tragic and operatic, while the plaintiff walked away with nails that looked perfectly fine, just not enlightened enough to justify dragging the judicial system into the beauty aisle. 26. A man sued a coffee shop because the Wi-Fi password was too emotionally complicated, claiming the password's combination of numbers and symbols caused him productivity paralysis. The cup of coffee cost $4. The case ballooned into a digital age drama featuring cybersecurity experts testifying about password complexity with the seriousness of nuclear codes. The plaintiff insisted the password should encourage creativity, not block it, as though passwords exist to validate personal ambition. The shop reluctantly hired IT consultants, whose fees could have upgraded their entire internet system to something powered by unicorns. Court sessions analyzed the psychological impact of typing characters, an intellectual sinkhole from which no one emerged wiser. When the lawsuit fizzled, the only thing truly hacked was everyone's legal budget, a stark reminder that Wi-Fi may be free, but explaining it in court is not. 27. Someone sued a landscaping company because the perfectly trimmed hedge in their yard seemed too symmetrical, which they claimed made their home feel sterile and creepily intentional. The hedge service cost maybe $60. The lawsuit cost enough to buy a fleet of hedge trimmers. The plaintiff argued the hedge's mathematical precision oppressed their creativity, a sentiment no plant has ever intentionally provoked. The landscapers hired horticultural experts to defend the honor of rectangles, while lawyers debated whether geometry can be emotionally aggressive. Depositions involved pointing to photos of shrubbery with the gravity of identifying suspects in a lineup. After the case was dismissed, the plaintiff still disliked the hedge. But the truly offensive symmetry was now in the form of two matching stacks of legal bills, one theirs, one everyone else's. 28. A woman sued a pet groomer because her dog's haircut made the dog look too self-conscious, a psychological assessment that would surprise professional veterinarians everywhere. The haircut cost $40. The lawsuit cost enough to fund a dog spa with gold-plated water bowls. The plaintiff insisted the groomer had damaged her dog's confidence, citing the dog's reluctance to make eye contact as proof of emotional devastation. The groomer hired animal behaviorists who testified with gentle patience that dogs do not contemplate their hairstyles with existential dread. Attorneys, billing cheerfully, orchestrated a courtroom drama involving canine posture charts, grooming technique breakdowns, and the bold claim that a dog refusing to sit still is not evidence of a midlife crisis. When the judge dismissed the case, the dog remained adorable, the plaintiff remained aggrieved, and the legal fees remained astronomically higher than any creature with four paws should ever inspire. 29. A man sued a delivery company because the package they left at his door was angled awkwardly, making him feel socially judged by an inanimate box. The package contained a $5 trinket, but this plaintiff transformed the moment into a psychological opera about perceived disrespect. He argued the crooked placement suggested carelessness, which damaged his sense of household order. The delivery company, likely rethinking its business model, hired logistics experts to analyze package orientation like it was a sacred ritual. Lawyers debated whether cardboard can convey emotional tone, a conversation that undoubtedly shortened several lifespans. Witnesses described porch slope angles, wind interference, and best practices for box alignment. By the end, the legal spending towered over the trinket's value so dramatically that the box became a monument to misplaced priorities. And somewhere in all of this, the package itself probably still sat unopened. The ultimate symbol of money wasted on meaning invented from nothing. Chaos, pettiness, and legal bills bigger than the problems they solved, a perfect snapshot of civilization. Now go vote for the dumbest one in the comments, and stick around for even worse decisions.